Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sloppy Lab. This is Bottom of the Beaker, the weekly show about the design, ducks, and strategy of Keyforge, everyone, and I mean everyone's favorite unique game. I am the very sniffly JT Russell, and with me tonight is the man who has given cause to archery contest judges all around the world to say, "Excuse me, sir, please wait your turn." I am, of course, talking about Quick Draw 3457 to be precise. How we doing, Quick Draw?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you're so sniffly over there. But on the bright
Hmm.
side, no one's going to be elusive around you.
No,
So
no. You can pile up as many cloaking dongles as you want. They'll know exactly where I am. And oh gosh, we are extra sloppy tonight for your all's benefit. You all get extra sloppy, an extra dose of sloppy, as it were. We'll be not taking this one back to the lab for refinement like we normally do with a week of lead time on editing. So you're probably going to get a bunch of sniffles flowing through. Apologies in advance for that. But if you came for the neat and tidy lab, you took a wrong turn somewhere between dis and shadows, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
um, I don't. Yeah, that's not us tonight.
Is it any night
We
though?
yeah, it maybe not, but tonight, I think especially sloppy. We're both, I guess, a little under the weather, but that's not going to stop us because we are talking about my favorite topic ever. And I would talk about this every week, didn't matter how I felt. And if,
Yeah.
if Murph Fudgenator is around, he knows exactly what's coming.
I think his ears ringing. Oh man, there's like a if you say the name of the format three times, he'll show up in the chat.
I hope so.
Yeah,
We haven't said the name yet, dancing around it.
dancing
I want to
around
see
it,
if he actually is in the chat.
teasing,
Um,
tantalizing. Yeah.
yeah. So what are we talking about tonight?
Well, we've been talking about adaptive an awful lot on the old Sloppy Labworks server, and you and I were chatting the other day, and we were saying, hey, it would be awfully nice if there was some sort of a bidding primer for folks who are looking to up their game on best of one adaptive short, right? Um, Kind of for a number of different reasons. I know I personally would love to get better at evaluating decks from a cold read and going with the bids that I feel more confident in. And I think a lot of it carries over to best of three adaptive too, for sure. And just kind of general uh, ability to read an Archon card. All of that's kind of mixed in. But yeah, we're talking about adaptive short in particular is going to be our focus, and hopefully this will be a sort of a mini primer, as it were, on bidding and bidding strategy. Yeah.
That's the hope. And you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, didn't you guys talk about this back in season one, episode six? And I would say you are correct. And I would like to say that we are going to refocus this one to be a bit different than that episode six was. Episode six was very heavily focused on a few specific matchups that we had polled the community on at the time and dug into with our good friend B-Hawk on his debut on Bottom of the Beaker. So we were very matchup heavy back then. And tonight's going to be a lot different. We are going to really talk about it from a higher level, kind of strategy wise, as you had called it, a primer. I really hope that we can live up to that goal of being like the resource people want to go to talk about like, hey, like how do I learn about what to do in an adaptive best of one game from start to finish? And so starting with which deck you're going to choose and sorry, like which deck you're going to bring first of all, deciding on which deck to bring to play in the match to begin with, and then evaluating the two decks in front of you to determine which one you want to choose. And then if you guys are so lucky to have the chain bidding happening by picking the same deck, we'll talk a bit about what goes into the factors of like how many chains am I thinking, like what am I looking for in this matchup to determine how many chains I'm going to go to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it. Sounds like a good plan. And maybe that would make a good, I don't know, sense to take a step back and talk about why adaptive best of one is a thing we might even want to be talking about. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, harkening back to season one, episode six, as it were. But in this day and age, and for us to revisit, yeah.
Yeah. So why are we talking about it? And why is it something that's so important to me and also something that I obviously love so much. Um, I think it's very important for us to strongly consider the merits of adaptive best of one as an organized play format. And I would love to talk more in detail about that and why this is kind of fundamental to the game of Keyforge since it's been made. The ability to kind of bring your own deck, no matter what it is, and no matter if you paid 10 cents for it or $200 for it, and you're still going into that match with an equal chance against your opponent, I think is just absolutely critical for this game's success. And I truly hope that the more we talk about this and the more we dig into the strategy and the depth of this format, the more we can get the traction behind it to, in the near future, fingers crossed, become more of an official OP format.
Totally. And it wasn't planned to be an officially offered event at the last Vault Tour, but we did mention that we got to play a nice 8-person adaptive pod that filled up in a snap at the Vault Tour in Rochester. That was a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
there is now, uh, gosh, what's the word? Help me out here. I'm digging for the word. There is
Precedent.
precedent. Thank you. You knew the word
Yes.
the whole time, and you were just
I was just letting
letting
you
me
struggle a
sweat.
little bit more.
Yes, precedent for adaptive in OPGG land. There you go. So there you
There we
go.
go. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and best of one in particular, because one of the first things that you'll always hear from some critics is saying, well, at a Vault Tour you can't play adaptive because you need best of three and it takes too long. Well, I am here to tell you, you do not need best of three. Best of one adaptive is still an extremely good skill testing format, giving opportunities to both players, rewarding skill in the evaluation of deck lists and reading of Archon cards, which we'll talk about a bit more during this episode here. Um, Plenty of merits to this format, and really, there's a rebuttal for almost every critique of adaptive as an organized play format. And so I really, yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. If you can't tell, and we've had probably more episodes on adaptive of some form than I think any other topic on this show,
That could be true.
except maybe if you're counting double-sided artifacts.
Double side
That might be the only
artifacts,
other thing.
or maybe Rector. I don't know, in some form or another. Rector
Mentions of Rector for sure. That
transcends
definitely tops it.
all topics and
But
formats.
you know, even a lot of the double-sided artifact discussions are very relevant to adaptive because of the nature of how those cards interact and the strategy around those cards. They make for extremely good adaptive cards. The
Hmm.
double-sided artifacts do. So there's definitely a connection there, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I think especially too when you're, or in addition, as you're considering, how to get into bidding, a lot of these double-sided artifacts reveal, uh, nuances to the soul of a deck and what it's trying to do. Whether or not it's doing those things, but a lot of the whether or not it's got any particular artifact in it, but a lot of the things that you consider when you're evaluating a double-sided artifact for a deck are things that you consider when evaluating a deck generally.
Mhm.
So I like it. I like it.
So let's just build on that. So besides double-sided artifacts, what do you look for when you're choosing which deck to bring to an adaptive best of one match?
Okay, so you mean we're not, aside from Whirlpool, aside
Aside
from
from Whirlpool, aside from Mecha Buoy, aside from Tide Warp, all of my favorite adaptive cards. Like, what do you like? What makes you like look at your pile of I won't say how many decks,
hmm.
and say this is the one that I want to bring to an adaptive tournament.
Yeah. Uh, it's a good question. I have a number of different criteria. Uh, I want decks that aren't going to overwhelmingly win or lose most often. So I generally my personal approach is to try and have an adaptive game and 2-0 when it's best of three. And I think that carries over to best of one because I want a deck that's not an obvious choice or going to result in a heavy chain bid. Uh,
Hmm.
Generally, that's kind of my preference, and I think that's usually a good idea. Though there are some counter arguments to be made for going for extremes in some cases, sure. But I like to pick something that's middling. I like to pick something that's not straightforward to play. So I'm not typically looking for a deck that's a straight up arc battle type deck, which is, hey, I'm going to play creatures, replay some actions for Amber, and that's my game. Um, uh, yeah, Yeah, those are kind of the
I
first.
agree with all those points, but
Yeah,
you glossed over the most important one.
I did.
First
Well,
one that you need to consider is like,
I
does
left
this
some for
deck
you.
belong? Does this deck belong to Dark Tidings? If so, you can consider it. If
Hmm.
not, put it back in the bin.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
I honestly don't know if I'm ever going to bring a non-Dark Tidings deck to another active event ever again in my life, unless I am forced to by means of rotation or something.
That's bold.
Um, I mean, seriously, it's a incredibly rewarding set for adaptive, and I think there's two aspects that are also important factors. One is familiarity,
Yes.
and you want to be familiar with the deck that you're bringing. And at this point, I'm pretty familiar with Dark Tidings. And then the other side of that coin is trying to bring something that your opponent is not necessarily going to be well versed in. And so you don't want to bring very obvious combos that the deck is playing towards unless there's a very complex strategy to get to that point. So, like a double boo Winds of Death key abduction deck may not be as good of a choice since that's like a pretty reliable combo in most of the cases, and you want to try to find something that your opponent's going to look at and be like, huh, I'm not really sure how to get the most value out of this, especially in a best of one. Because in a best of three, you're getting both players getting the chance to like try the deck out, play it out, see how it works, see what doesn't work, see what the game plan is, and most importantly, see what the owner is doing with it first. But in an adaptive best of one, you don't have that luxury of seeing it in action before you actually have to play it potentially or bid on it. And so I think it's important to bring something that is going to throw your opponent off, something that you're very comfortable with, but they're going to look at it and be like, I'm not sure what to make of this. I think that's a very important factor when choosing a deck for Adaptive Festa 1.
Totally. I like having decks that either have sort of sub games baked into them, right? There's a contest happening for I don't know, some sort of smaller goal that's not just, forge the three keys by making amber. It's like, can you make can you get the epic quest off or something like that? And I like decks that when you read the Archon card, you see it, but you're like, does this work? I don't know, and it's kind of hard to get from the outset. Additionally, there can just be an overwhelming like volume of complexity, and you're not really sure how things hang together, and you get some advantage from having done the time putting the reps on the deck as well. So both of those kind of fill in there. The one thing that I'm going to say is I don't obviously, well, we said that familiarity is key. You absolutely need to be familiar with your deck when you sit down to play with it in an event. Ideally, right? If you're playing for fun, sure, bring whatever and jam. But if you're going to, some big event, your Vault Tour adaptive best of one event, right? You should be familiar with it at that point. Obviously, when I'm like going through my pile of untold number of decks, I'm not going to be familiar with all of them. But that's not the criteria that I'm using. I will become familiar with whatever deck I ultimately choose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So by the time you get to the table, you should be bringing a deck that you're familiar with.
totally.
A couple other points that aren't as specific to best of one adaptive, but I think just adaptive in general that also apply here. Um, I like to bring decks that have a high amount of decision points, and by that I mean like very specific options presented to you, where there is perhaps two right answers, but one is more right than the other. And so the types of
Hmm.
effects that come to mind for that specifically are targeted archives, targeted recursion, off house plays, and some kind of examples of maybe something that's not quite as its efficiency in the sense of like decks of Keyforge efficiency, but it's not the same in my opinion for adaptive, which is random archiving or draw pips, which can, very widely swing like depending on what you draw and what you happen into by chance, and then dangerous random plays. Like if there's a lot of wild wormholes in there or something like that, that could really kind of swing the variance a bit more. Unless your strategy is to never play the dangerous random plays and let your opponent fall into that trap. Like that
Hmm.
could be an exception to the rule. But um, on a similar note, I also like to bring low variance decks. I want to know what I'm getting out of the deck, as far as we've talked before about adaptive being a format that mitigates the deck, right? And it means that both players are on equal playing field as far as what deck they bring. I also like to try to mitigate the luck as much as possible in a deck. So I don't want to bring a deck that's like it can high roll or it can tokenize its important cards and then do nothing. But again, the exception being like maybe it's a Winds of Exchange deck where you never want to make tokens. Like maybe you only have like 3 token makers, you're never going to get value out of them anyway, and you just discard that clone home because you know you don't want to do anything with that blorb. You're never going to do anything with it. So like there could be exceptions like that, but for the most part, I avoid woe for the variance reason. A
Hmm.
lot of woe decks are very high variance just based on like what you see through the deck the first time, what you tokenize. Um, and so, yeah, so those decision points of being like, I'm making a decision about what to store away for the future. We've seen Not Tonight like do some real magic with Dranzit, his Dranzit to Castle, like her
Yeah.
adaptive deck that she just won KTL with, defeated me in the finals on it. That deck is chock full of targeted archive decisions.
Hmm.
And the cool thing about those is that the opponent doesn't even see what you're doing. So like even if you're playing a best of 3 match, they have no idea what you're archiving.
Yep.
And they don't get to learn that information. Whereas you might have a deck with like more open plays where it's like very clear what you're doing and your opponent can pick up on that. So those kind of like secret but targeted decisions to me are a pretty big factor in like when I look at a deck and say like, is this going to be a good adaptive deck or not?
Totally. And I'd put sloppy pips in sort of the same camp as well. So that you've got lab work, which lets you, you know, from a hand of hidden information, tuck something in the archives. Your opponent doesn't get the benefit of seeing your choice in a best of three format. Also, sloppy pips, they'll get to see what's been discarded, but they don't see, with, relative to what else was in your hand, they don't get to see that,
Yeah,
which is kind of
they
nice.
lose that context.
Is that
Very,
context?
very true.
Yeah. Cool. And I also think it's worth mentioning that while we're on this point, that one of the critiques of the format generally has been, yes, we normalize the deck out of the luck skill deck equation for determining the outcome of the match. But folks will say, well, now I've got sort of a 50-50 coin flip, and that feels not great, right? And I would say, well, we are yes normalizing deck out, and hopefully that means we are on even footing. And assuming even play, there's going to be some that comes down to luck too. But even with that D out of the equation, there's going to be differences in the split between skill and luck in the match that gets played. Even assuming we choose the same deck, are exactly of the same mind, and we're correct on the bidding, and we both play flawlessly. Like so that's a lot of big ifs. But even then,
Mhm.
the number of chains we land on and our decisions on what decks to bring have a big impact on where that skill and luck split lands in the final deck. So I think there's a lot of forethought you can put into your deck selection, and hope that your opponent does the same, sure. But a lot of forethought you can put into that deck selection to ensure that as much of that split is leaning towards skill as possible at the end of the day.
Yeah, and so I want to answer Floximal's very good question in the chat. So Floximal says, because you're saying some decks are better than others for adaptive, comp level still isn't bring any deck, right? I mean, yes and no. So like there, I think similar to what I've talked about just a minute ago with like there's more than one right decision, right? But some decisions are more right than others. I think that's kind of the case here. Like you will absolutely have a chance to win a match, no matter what deck you bring in adaptive best of one. You are completely mitigating the deck factor in the luck skill deck. But there are ways that you can try to maximize the skill part based on what you bring and your experience with it. Um, I think the last like kind of related point to that I think about is I'm not bringing a deck like you said that's going to like definitely win games 1 and 2 if it were a best of 3 series. I want to bring something that's more middle of the road because I want a deck that is able to beat almost anything depending on matchup, punch up a lot more than you might think it could, but also it could potentially lose to a lot of things that maybe it shouldn't lose to. Like this is all like not based on variance, but based on the skill and the decisions you make in the game. And so that's why I always land in like 70 to 75 ish DT decks because they are really like sneaky as far as what they can win with, like how they can win. Uh, but they can also, be pretty weak to certain matchups or be susceptible to being outplayed. And so those are the kind of things that I look for as well. And so, yeah, there are better decks I think you could bring, but it is still absolutely a bring whatever deck you want format, in my opinion.
Yeah, it certainly is unique in the sense that it's the one format where any deck can have an even chance of winning. And but yeah, like we were saying, some decks will uh, result in more games that are having that even chance be more skill dependent than luck dependent. Sure, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I think also that uh, the the gap between the quote unquote good and bad decks for the format are much is much narrower than in other formats, right? And the band of what constitutes an excellent choice is much wider than in other formats, right? So even if you
Hmm.
said, gosh, only the middle 65% of decks printed are great choices for adaptive, like that's pretty good, right? Like if you open a display of any set um, and said how many of these could potentially take me to the top of a vault tour, uh, and the answer was 65% of them, or whatever the number was I said, yeah, there's really only one format you could be talking about, and it's not close. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Um, so as far as so that's kind of like the first section, like what are you bringing and why.
Mm.
But then you get into the actual matches themselves, and you're choosing which deck to play, right? And you're both looking at the other person's deck, probably the first time you've ever seen the deck that they are bringing, unless it's a more famous deck. And so, like, how do you approach that, and how do you start? Like, what do you start with as far as like, okay, like I know what my deck does, very familiar with it. I know its strengths and weaknesses. Now I see this deck that I've never seen before. You're reading the Archon card. You have about 5 minutes to decide which deck you're going to bid on. So not even think about like necessarily how much you're going to bid, but first just decide in your head like which deck am I going to bid on? Because in a best of one game, you don't have the luxury of the games beforehand. So you just first thing you're trying to figure out is which deck to play. So how do you do that?
Mm-hmm. And this is where I'm really glad we're having the conversation because it's not a place that I am particularly strong on, or I guess I should say that I'm not particularly methodical about, scientific about, as it were. Like we were chatting before, I think we tend to both be a little bit gut driven on this. Though I've gone through this exercise with you before, and you are at least very good about counting basic stats like pip counts, creature counts, looking for key pieces like where the board sweeps. Weep. Sorry,
Oh,
had,
ugh,
had to just twist that one in there. Where the board
ugh.
shout out sweeper keepers. Shout out sweeper keepers. Where the board wipes. And artifact control and things of that sort, and seeing if there are glaring differences, right? If I'm looking at a deck and seeing two decks and seeing 18 pips in one and 6 in another, that is pretty strong signal, barring anything else jumping out at me. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. Are there
Yeah,
other
there's a
things
lot
that
of
you go for, or is it kind of those are the big ones?
those are the big ones. So like the first thing I count is Amber Pips when you're looking at a deck. Now, before I get into some details and other things I look at, I want to say like don't use decks of Keyforge.
Mm,
Like look at just an Archon card or look at like a Archon Matrix like display of a card. Um, you will get better at the format faster if you move away from the crutch of looking at decks of Keyforge. And especially don't look at the big number. The big number will influence your decision making in a bad way. So don't look at that. Get used to reading the Archon card itself and being able to pull this stuff out and identify what you need. And I mean, admittedly, that will require some memorization of like, especially in sets before Dark Tidings, when your Archon card did not tell you the card type right away. You need to know like what card types am I looking at, which ones are creatures, which ones have pips, how many pips they have, what enhancements does this deck have, and which cards
mm,
bring them. So like it definitely requires a little bit of memorization if you're looking at like a physical Archon card at a Vault Tour, for example. So there is a caveat there. That is definitely something that some people don't like to have that memory aspect, but it is definitely a part of this. But once you get there and once you have that knowledge of what you're looking at in front of you, first thing I always count is Amber Pips because that's going to at least give you an idea of how much that deck can generate Amber. But when I'm doing this count in my head, I actually don't just count Amber Pips. I count anything that will get you Amber on a play.
mm-hmm,
And so I look at things like information exchange, and that counts as a pip to me. I look at anything that steals as like an extra pip for that. There are things like Vault's Blessing. So if I see something like Vault's Blessing, I instantly count how many mutants do I have, especially how many mutants do I have in house. because I'm trying to add up. This is not really like the decks of Keyforge expected amber, but I'm just trying to think in my head about like how quickly is this going to be able to make amber, and if it can make you know 20 plus amber just out of playing cards, that's a pretty rushy deck. Like a very action forward play effect deck, and that's going to be a huge factor in my bidding. So the amber burst and rush that it has available to it is probably like the primary factor for me. Um, After that, just like you had said, creature counts and board wipes. If one deck has 24 creatures and the other deck has no creature control, that really tilts the scales as far as uh, which one has like the more rush ability. Because your rush is not just like playing bonus amber. Your rush is also like I have a board of 8 Star Alliance creatures and they're going to reap the rest of the game because you can't do anything about it. That's a very important factor as well. So counting the creature count, and again, creature count in house to see if there is a main house that is a potential line of play, and then what answers the opponent has for that kind of main house. These are all things that I look for. I sometimes will look at artifact control, but only if there's like a standout artifact that changes the game. Otherwise, I'm not that interested in seeing like, oh, well, they've got a reclaim by nature to handle like a seeker needle or a skeleton key. Like, okay, that might come into play during the game, but it's not going to affect my chain betting or which deck I'm going to bid on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And some good comments from the chat here too, saying that yeah, this is the kind of memorization component is what gives folks some hangups about pushing it for organized play. I'm not, I'm not, I'm not sure that I would advocate necessarily for like if you're trying to foster a local scene, you're trying to bring in brand new people to the game, like totally play single deck sealed, get those folks in, get them hooked. You can have adaptive in the rotation, what have you. It's a great way to spark conversations about deck evaluation with some of those folks and maybe kind of get them interested in that sense. But I mean, I wouldn't throw a brand new person who's like just starting the game into an adaptive event. That's gonna be recipe for some field
Mm-hmm.
bads, especially if it's adaptive
I
short. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a valid criticism. I won't say that about every critique of adaptive, but I would say this is a valid one.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some of my locals that are actually quite experienced in the game, but they just don't have that memory of like that database in their head of every card and what bonuses it offers and things like that. I've played some friendly games in my local store, and instead of letting them read the Archon card, I'll just give them the deck and let them look through it.
Yep.
I wouldn't do that at a vault tour probably, and if I'm playing in an adaptive vault tour, I would not expect anyone to do that.
Are you allowed to flip through your opponent's deck? Is that a thing you're allowed to do?
I don't believe so.
But you are allowed to
Um,
pull up the Vault Master page for a deck. Yes.
that's another one that I think is a gray area unless it is in a different language. So I don't
Mm.
know if you're allowed. I don't know if you're entitled to the knowledge of which enhancements land where when bidding on a deck.
Mm.
In a
Interesting.
best of one, that is certainly a gray area. I think it's something that, Mass Mutation came out during the pandemic, and there was never a Vault Tour hosted with Adaptive after that point. And I think that is one of the rules that was kind of never needed to be clarified because there was never that variability during previous Adaptive Vault Tours. So I think I would agree that's something that should be clarified, whether or not you can look at an external resource, a third party resource, or the vault itself to see like where these enhancements land. Because I do believe that should be fair information for both players to know.
Yep.
If you bring a deck that has a rad penny with 4 bonus pips on it, and you know that, it's a pretty big advantage to know, you
Sure.
know, what
Yeah.
that is. So I would agree that that should be public knowledge.
Yeah. I definitely would get behind something that was like, hey, we're gonna put all the printed pips right under the Archon card, whether it's a bonus, could be demarked in some way, or a natural pip, just so you could scan the Archon card and get that information, or have it just be yeah, you can browse the vault, master vault entry
Mm-hmm.
for a deck and get that. I Yeah, I don't think that should necessarily be a differentiator. Happening to have a funky distribution of pips that really changes the power level of your deck. Doesn't seem
Mm-hmm.
like really in the spirit of the format to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And on a similar note, another thing people have said is that vault tours should be a representation of the game that people are playing in their local stores. And in general, I agree with that. But I do think an exception should be made for adaptive because
Hmm.
it is a format that is a very skill testing format where to me it is looking for not just the player with the best player with the best deck, but it's really looking for the best player. And it is intended to be like a premier level competitive format. It is not really intended to be a casual local event format, although I would certainly love it at the casual level as well, but I understand not everyone would. So I understand that idea of Vault Tours should be an extension of the what's played in the LGS, but I don't think that's a deal breaker here for me.
Hmm. I might even go the other way on that, actually. Like, I I do think that the high level organized play, sort of acts as almost an ad campaign for the game, a promotional campaign for the game, and makes an awful lot of sense. For all the reasons that we're both aware of for those formats to be the same. I don't think that means you need to have it be played at every weekly event, right? If it's offered as an option, folks are aware of it, and it gets played some. Like that's okay. If it's an option, like that's fine. Uh, if you're hosting, store championship, and there are three different events at your store championship, make it an option for one of those three events. And I
Hmm.
think that's cool too, especially if you have a local scene where there's a wide gap in deck strength from among the folks who are showing up, but maybe they want to, compete on even footing with respect to decks. That's it's a great option if they wanted to bring something, play an Archon format as opposed
Absolutely,
to a sealed
yeah,
format. Yeah.
absolutely. For a store championship, you're totally right. It should be a third option or a fourth option for a format to play for a store championship type event. I think it'd be perfect, and for the exact reasons you mentioned as well. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, well, um, that was a good tangent. I appreciate the questions. I think it's definitely a good conversation to have. Um, there was one other part of an Archon card that I look for that I think is important in evaluating how a deck's going to play and what kind of answers it could have, and that is looking for key control in each house.
Hmm.
So I like to look and see like, okay, you've got these three houses, and sure, like this one might have a too much to protect, but maybe that shadows doesn't have anything else to actually take you off check out after you playing that TMTP. So I like to look for cards that can either tax to take someone off check if they're at six, to capture to get them below six, things like that. I think it's important to know what answers your opponent has during the game, and this is why I think it's such an important thing to evaluate the first time I look at an Archon card. Because if I look at this and say like, okay, this is a pretty cool deck, but I know that if they call Untamed or Logos, they can't take me off check, and so all I have to do is go to check, and they're either going to let me forge a key or they're going to have to call dis. You know, and I think that's an important like strategy to keep in mind when you're bidding, because if you get stuck with that deck that doesn't have like key control answers in two of the three houses, you're going to be in a pickle if you end up like kind of just burning your dis hand in lieu of like you could have reaped for like three or four, and then your opponent goes to check for key three on a burst, and you don't have an answer for it anymore. So um, I do think it's important to look at key control as a factor in determining which deck you want to bid on as well.
Okay, so it's kind of summing up there. Then we're looking at sort of creature count, bonus amber, board control, board wipes and such, key control, and perhaps situationally artifact control if there are artifacts playing a big role uh, in the matchup. I I generally am also kind of zooming out and trying to get a sense for what each of the deck is trying to do, like how's it winning, and if there's a mismatch there, right? So uh, maybe creature counts are the same. Board count or a board wipe count is the same, but one of these decks is like needs to reap to win, or something along those lines. And you're like, okay, there's a crux to this deck strategy that's just nerfed by the other deck, and that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
strong signal too. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like envisioning what your game plan is going to be to win if you're on either side. Like even like think about like, okay, like I like deck A better, but if I had to play deck B, how would I win this game? What do I have to do? And envisioning that and how you're going to get across the finish line, I think is a very important part of evaluating the Archon lists in this kind of format, and understanding like, okay, like do I have the answers, or how am I going to make like attack? And those are kind of factors in determining like not only which deck is favored, but also which deck, like how high you're going to bid on the decks.
Yep. Yeah. How much does sort of your own personal affinity, as it were, for a deck play into your assessment of which you want to bid on, which you want to choose to play?
It's pretty small, especially since you're looking at this in a vacuum, right? Like if I had to choose which deck to bring, like in general, like before the event, that's very much play style. Like I want to make sure I bring something that is my style of play. But once you're in the vacuum of a matchup of two decks, and say like, I prefer Rush, I love Rush decks, and let's say I'm looking at a Rush deck and I'm looking at a grind deck that you like to bring all the
Mm-hmm.
time. Uh, it is going to be a very minor factor in my style, at least. It is a minor factor in determining which deck to choose. It might affect my chain bidding, but not by very much. And so the thing is, like, if your grind deck has four Infernus and my rush deck has four Dust Pixie and two Fertility Chance, it doesn't matter how much I like rush, I'm going to get a bunch of pips purged.
Mm.
And that's going to really take away a lot of the value that I get as a rush player playing a rush deck. So it's not going to influence me in which deck I choose, but I would say one to two chains is how it's going to impact the actual bidding once it gets there.
Okay. Cool. 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 And questions from the chat too to round things out. Like, do you think about disruption at all, or some of the other kind of stats that are featured prominently on DOK?
Disruption is a good one to think about because if a deck has like a Rushing Guntis with lots of recursion and the other deck doesn't have a lot of answers for that, you certainly need to factor that in. Are you going to be able to answer that? Also, if a deck has like a bunch of succubus or a bunch of toxins and you don't have a way to handle those, you got to remember like if you're bidding on the other deck, you're going to be probably stuck with an even smaller hand turn after turn. Binding irons is definitely a card that I look for. And we're kind of veering into kind of like the next part of this conversation, which is like how many chains do you bid? And that type of disruption becomes more prominent in my evaluation for determining like how many chains are we talking here, because a binding irons really changes the math. Especially double binding irons can really change the math on what you're willing to bid to. And then there's other cards on the other side, like a Tau Tau Vapors, which can really negate a lot of the chains that you get having that kind of efficiency. So when you're evaluating how many chains to bid, you have to factor in those types of cards on both sides as well, like disruption, but also like the general efficiency and targeted archives. That like, if you have a deck that is going to be archiving a ton, then you can probably afford to take more chains with it if it happens to be the one that you're planning on bidding on to begin with.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I worry about it more kind of when you're trying to settle on a number. In terms of kind of which deck do I want to be playing, I will look for whether or not there's this like overarching strategy around disruption and whether that is in itself problematic and enough for me to think that this deck's going to win, right? Like if I see, Restringuntus just double exhume, bunch of taunters in Sanctum, and the other deck isn't, some deck with a bunch of damage pips, then I'm going to be very, very heavily swayed by that. But yeah, if it's a couple succubus and a binding irons, I'll notice it, but it's probably
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. I can't say that I've really necessarily got a like disruption box that I tick off when I'm checking through. And again, like if it's 5 minutes, if it's a couple minutes, yeah, it's tough. It maybe rolls up into the now you trust your gut. um,
Yeah,
yeah, layer at
we're
the end.
both we're both players that, as you mentioned, trust our guts a lot in this chain bidding process. So um, it's to me, it's not a science either. Like I don't think I'll consider it more. And so, just as a teaser, um, there will be an article blog published on sloppylabwork.com. Probably the next week is the goal to kind of like put all of this discussion in writing. And between now and then, I'm going to strongly consider like what are some potential heuristics for making these calculations. But I think heuristics in this case might do more harm than good, because I think it's very important that everybody kind of considers more in like the matchup specific vacuum that you're in, like what kind of chain bidding you're doing. And if you have these heuristics, they're not going to apply to every matchup. And I would worry too much that heuristics in this try to get too scientific in something that is intentionally just a wild and crazy, like
Hmm.
no rules kind of format where like you can see the craziest things you'll ever see in Keyforge happen in this format. Um, like I've had some incredibly wild games in Kagi this season just because adaptive like lends itself to people playing like wackier things and weird situations come up. And so I think heuristics kind of lose a lot of their value in a format like this.
Totally. Yeah, I would not expect us to come up with a formula that says, okay, this is the deck you should bid on because of, these six factors that you worked out in your head in 5 minutes. But, a number of folks have tried with, apps and lots of stats that don't
But
necessarily,
even
yeah.
yeah, even like trying to say things like, okay, like each card you have that archives, add one chain.
Oh,
Like
sure, sure. No,
I
no.
wouldn't even do things like that. Like it's just too matchup dependent that I don't think you can just look at it and say like three Telltale Vapors means that I can bid three more chains. Like I won't even go there.
Totally. I do like seeing. So I like the stats that we advocated, kind of running through your mental checklist when you're deciding on what deck to bid. Not because I think, oh, you're going to come to a situation you say, oh, this deck has 15 pips, that deck has 14. Like, obviously go with the 15 pip deck. No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you run through these stats and you'll at least have a gut check for, oh, wait a minute. When there is something extreme that you don't want to miss, just to kind of make sure that you're not losing that. Like, yeah, there's 18 versus 6. That's
Hmm.
that's a strategy in itself that you need to ask yourself if the deck with 6 pips can handle right, a wide enough gap where it's a potentially winning advantage. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed.
Cool. All right. Well, let's switch gears then. I think we've delved that one pretty deep, as it were. Uh, we've both picked the same deck, quick draw. Look at that. Let's talk about how we get to an actual number
Hmm.
that we should land on for chains. And I guess
Yeah.
we had some spoilers already. We trust our guts. We got good probiotics in the mix, as the chat's been saying. Yeah, healthy guts, quick draw. How
Yeah.
how do we figure out what number to bid? What's the secret?
Yeah. Well, there's no secret. But beyond that, the first thing that I look for again is the amber and the burst ability. Like if like you had said 18 to 6, like okay, like this deck clearly can generate a lot more amber than the other one. And if we both choose the one that generates the more amber, like how is the other side going to respond to that? And how quickly can they respond to that? I think thinking about rush decks versus grind decks, which is like, the scale that we've always talked about, you know, making more details about like keyboard archetypes, and there's like this rush grind scale that we have where grind slows the game down and makes the game literally last longer, whereas rush tries to end the game faster by making amber faster, whether that is through bonus amber or by reaping out. Like both of those things would be high on the rush scale. Now, if you're playing with a rush deck, that implies the game is going to be faster, which means that the chains are going to be less of a factor. Or sorry,
Mm.
more of a factor in a short game. They're going to extend it a bit more. If you have a grind deck, two grind decks, let's say, and they're both like not going to make enough amber to win the game in 10 turns, that means that those chains that you bid, like they're going to be depleted by the time you like are nearing the end of the game or even nearing the mid game in some cases. And so if you have a rush deck, I feel like rush decks can't always take as many chains as a grind deck could.
Mm.
And so thinking about like, you always like to play this deck called Psy, which makes keys cost 18 for both players. And it is a very long, grindy game where that one has enough, I think, redundancy in it as well that it can extend the game pretty long. And if it's playing against another grind deck, it's probably at a heavy advantage. And it can probably handle a lot of chains in a matchup against another grind deck. Now, if it was against a rush deck, then it becomes more of a question of like, okay, like I'm not even sure which one to bid on because that deck I know is a little bit susceptible to rush. And if you can't get the pieces in time, and I think a lot of grind decks are like that, right? Like a lot of grindy decks are like, if you can't get your engine going, and if you can't reach that tipping point of inevitability in the matchup, then you need the game to last that long. And so you can't afford to take a ton of chains if you're trying to get to that tipping point faster. And if you're worried about your opponent winning the game before you get there. So I think the rush part of this is the first thing that I think about when determining how many chains can I go.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that a lot, and I like tying it back to the rush grind scale. I mean, I almost think about chains in this sense as taking away your momentum, right? So the grind deck is going to have be less effective at slowing the pace of the game down. That's going to hurt it a lot against rush decks, right? It's just not going to get itself together quickly enough. And in a rush versus rush matchup, yeah, losing using that momentum and being able to drive the game towards completion in your favor is really impactful. Yeah, um, yeah, totally. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also remember like the context of how you're going to play and how you're going to bid. So first of all, in a best of one, first player is going to be random, and it's not going to be determined until after the decks are chosen and the
Mm-hmm.
bids are assigned, the chains are assigned. So, in a best of three, though, you have to factor in like you have the knowledge going into game three of who's going first, most likely, or at least who has the choice. But in a best of one, you won't have that knowledge, and so like kind of keep your bid within one, depending on like plus or minus one either way, knowing that you might be going second, and just kind of bid accordingly. But the other part is that during the bidding, obviously, like you have different bidding strategies you could do. Some people like to go straight from 0 to 6. Sometimes maybe they'll go 0 to 7. They like to go straight to the point where they think is like close to the right bid. And I will generally go a little bit slower. I'll give my opponent the chance to like maybe pass on a bid whenever I get a deck for a bargain, I think. And so I like to kind of go a bit slower. And so if we're talking like if we're bidding on your deck, you start at 0, I'll go 1, you'll go 2, and you kind of like get a feel for where your opponent's at with it too. And then once you start to get to that point where you're like, I don't know if this is the right place for me, then you start to use your gut more and think like, okay, like can I still win if I have 5 chains, meaning that I will start with one fewer card in hand and I will have 4 straight turns of a 5 card hand after that. Like how much is that going to slow me down? How many turns do I expect a game like this to last?
Mm-hmm.
And is 4 turns really going to make that big of a difference when like, you know, the chains are there's no like perfect valuation for what a chain is. Like yeah, you draw one fewer card, but that doesn't mean you can't draw 3/1/1 hands the entire time, right? Like it could happen. And so, and if you're a board centric deck, you could maybe get like the 2/2/1s, play 2 creatures, reap twice, shed a chain, maybe play another card if you're lucky. Like you can get through those chains fairly quickly. I think quicker than people assume. I think I do see a lot of players kind of stop like way too soon, thinking like, oh man, 5 chains sounds like a lot, but 5 chains is not that much.
I once had a teammate on a former team where, well, I guess former incarnation of a team where their basic ideology was, yeah, the first 5 chains don't matter. It just like doesn't matter. I don't know if I'd go quite that far, but I think that,
It's yeah, it's a valid theory because I would say the first chain definitely doesn't matter.
yeah,
Like just bidding one chain indicates that if you're bidding one chain and expecting them to pass, you are essentially valuing the deck the same, but you are bidding based on your personal style and preference.
yeah.
To me,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's where I see that. So 2 chains is pretty close to that as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think anything under 5 chains, like not mattering. I don't know if I'd quite go that far, but um, it's not as bad as people think it is.
I'd agree with that. So I want to back up a second. Do you not have a number in mind that you want to end on when you begin bidding?
Honestly, it's like sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
You dirty slob.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I have more experience in best of threes,
Yeah, yeah.
and like I said, with best of threes, you have that prior experience of the 2 games to be able to come closer to it. But in a best of one, I mean, yeah, like it's going to be in the back of my mind where like, okay, like I should not go above 5 here, but like I'm very flexible as I approach that number, thinking like, oh, okay, like yeah, I think actually, yeah, because I'm still evaluating the card as we're doing the bidding, right? I'm still looking at things, still trying to see like, okay, like they went from 0 to 4. Like there's mind games involved. It's psychological as well. Like how fast your opponent is bidding, how much they're jumping. Like you can certainly like cause your opponent to think twice about something if you're just like instantly 0 to 6. And they're like, wait a minute, 6 was my max, but they went there instantly. Like, does that mean they think it's worth more than that? And can I go 7 and maybe make them bid 8 and stick them with it for like way more than I think it's worth?
Hmm.
Like there's definitely some psychological mind games to this. So I try to keep an open mind as I'm bidding and kind of observe like how the bidding evolves as well and take that extra time to evaluate it further and make sure I'm not missing something.
Hmm. I do keep an open mind, but absolutely have a number in mind when I start bidding. And
How often do you break that number? If you say like,
uh,
oh, 4's my max, but then I'm like, oh well, maybe I'll go 5 now.
not terribly often. Not terribly
Okay.
often. Yeah. I will insert, a dramatic long pause just to make you think.
I know you would. I know that's very much a thing that you would do.
Yeah, we're paused at 3, sweating whether or not we're going to go to 4, but really I'm going to go to 6, and I'm just checking
We
checking
both
Discord for
we
notifications.
both know we're going 6 more.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, I always have I always pause before the bidding starts and at least have a number in mind. I may adjust that after the fact, but it's never kind of in response to how my opponent is bidding.
Sure. I'm not I'm yeah, and to clarify, like I am not trying to read into their signals they're sending, but
Hmm.
I do think that, you can learn something about how the other player is approaching the matchup as well based on how they're bidding.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, I mean, it's dangerous to read into much, but sure, if you jump
Hmm.
from 1 to 3, it's less of a, oh, you think it's 4 is the right number, and more, maybe more like, oh, you want to be on an odd number, you want to be the one to be able to go for 7, or you want to stick me with 6.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
worry about it that much. I generally, this, I mean, a thing we've said often: assume my opponent's better than I am. uh,
Hmm.
and if I have the right number in mind, I'm not going to play mind games. I'll assume they have the right number in mind too. um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I also refer to the increase from 6 to 7 and also from 12 to 13. Like I call that like the turn, and how you kind of bid around the turn, I think is important too. Like if you see someone go straight to 6, it generally means that, well, it could mean, I don't want to say generally, but it could mean that they want you to go 7 and stick you with that to have one fewer card in your starting hand.
Sure.
It could be that. So there's like kind of factors like that too to think like, okay, maybe they went to 4, maybe I should go to 6, even though I think 5 is the right bid, just to make sure that like I get the deck that I want, and that if they want it, they're gonna pay a price for that. Because if I think 5 is the right number and I bid 5 and you bid 6, it can kind of feel bad to like give them the deck that you both agree is better for just a single chain more than you are willing to pay,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Sure. Though, I mean, your number is hopefully the point at which you think it's kind of even. And yeah, yeah, then you're asking yourself, is that extra chain enough for some preference, for some
Hmm.
personal preference? It's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, my general approach to this is, okay, I've already decided and we've agreed on which deck we think is better, is favored in the matchup. I'm trying to make broad buckets in my mind, whether I think it's, yeah, this deck is better, but it's kind of close, or yeah, this deck is better, but it's not particularly close, and oh my gosh, this is a blowout, and to kind of hone in from there. So if it's close, I'm probably in the 0 to 4 range, or I'm probably in the like 5 to 8 or 9 range if it's not particularly close. Whatever those buckets may be, and then narrowing in from there, probably using a bunch of the same stats that we were talking about from the previous sort of segment when you're analyzing the card initially.
Hmm.
But that's
Yeah.
sort of helpful for me to have that alongside how long is this game going to last in turns, unchained, and then trying to layer in, how many turns of an impact do I think that these chains are going to have on the deck that I'm bidding on, and whether or not that's going to be a significant, deciding factor in where
Hmm.
the breaking point is. But that's kind of my way
Yeah.
of thinking, how I orient around.
Yeah. And going back to the previous segment as well, like if we're both bidding on a deck that has the large ability to reap out and just create a runaway board state, and the opposing deck has one board wipe, like that's gonna affect your bidding as well if you're bidding on the deck with the creatures that you want to reap out with, because you might just end up getting in a situation where you're like, okay, I've got like four creatures on in one house on the board. I'm just gonna reap out until you find your board wipe, and then you play your board wipe, and then you just like refill it with a different house, and you can kind of bide your time. And so you have to evaluate like, okay, like if I go to six chains, am I going to be able to establish a board in time? You know, to get some value out of it before they find their board wipe and just like make me start over again, and maybe they've already like forged a key and I have nothing and no board to show for it. So kind of envisioning how the game's going to unfold, like if you have seven, starting with seven or eight chains against a low C deck, like how quickly do you think you can really establish a board that could get value before your opponent finds their board wipe, knowing they have no chains? So um, those kind of things factor in for sure as far as like how high you want to go. How much is it going to hinder your game plan if you go too high?
Cool. Cool. Well, that's good stuff to think on, and I like the advice in that it's coaching on how to think and not prescriptive on what to think, if that makes any sense. Because I don't think that there's necessarily a hard and fast set of things that you can tick down and arrive at, which is the right deck to play and what is the right bid to bid. If there were, it wouldn't be a terribly interesting game. We would just use that and see which deck was best, and then we'd all go home early or go out to the bar or something. I don't know. Yeah, but I think having some of these ideas as things to help you in your process of determination and orient around is very good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, quick draw. Any other notes you want to hit now, or should you just tease them and say read the article when it comes out?
Yeah. I don't, I there's nothing sticking out that I want. So I will definitely encourage you all to look for that article, hopefully published, by the end of May, we'll say,
Hmm.
just for a ballpark frame. But yeah, I'll have a lot of this information that we talked about here in there in written form. Hopefully have some more details in there as well that we didn't get to. It's a really exciting topic. There's actually a lot of momentum for adaptive right now in general. CAGI 10.0 season is ending this Sunday, the regular season.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you have already claimed your spot in the top cut.
I finished all my matches. We'll see about claimed. I think my chances are looking good, but we'll see about claimed. I don't want to jinx it. I think the chances are good. Yeah,
You're 5-1, right?
5-1. Yeah.
Pretty sure you're in.
All right.
I believe I'm not Murph, so I can't say with certainty, but I did give him like a proposed rundown of how to do cuts based on number of players in pods. And for the size of our group, which is six pods, I think it's like 42 players or so we're in. With six pods, it should be the top two from every pod making it, which means 5-1 is essentially a guarantee, um, unless three players happen to beat everybody except each other. It's very unlikely.
Hmm.
So I think you got a pretty good shot. Our teammate and friend Behawk also at 5-1. I'm pretty sure he's
Okay.
locked in. My only loss was to Behawk. So I have a decent chance if I can win my last matchup. And then I'm not actually sure if JDG and Crusader, and not tonight, how many games they've got in so far. So
A couple left to play. A couple left to play, but it's shaping up to look like there could be some sloppy players in the top cut.
let's
That'd be a
hope
lot of
so.
fun. That'd be a lot of fun.
And then give a plug to Keyforge Team League 2. Signups, I think, end around May 31st, I want to say.
Yep. Yeah, we got to get
There
our
is
registration in. Holy moly.
We do. We all do. Yeah. There is an adaptive wing of that, which I enjoyed immensely last season. Encourage everyone to sign up for it. KTL has one player playing Archon, one playing Triad, one playing Adaptive. Excellent team format, great league. There were over 20 teams last time around. So form a team. Find the link to the KTL server. You can ask me. I can send it to you. And then, yeah, like you had said, there's already an official GG endorsed adaptive pod under our belt. It's a good time to be an adaptive fan. I will be honest. It feels really good, and it's been like the part of the game that I've enjoyed the most is playing my adaptive matches for all these various leagues.
My matches for this CAG season have been a lot of fun. Yeah, hats off to the folks in Pod Sanctum. It's been a good time. Yeah. Yeah, how about event? Indeed. And one other note to mention too. we neglected to mention it in the second segment. But on the topic of analyzing Archon cards, the Weekend Key Warriors had an episode 10, I
Thank you.
believe, um, that was all
I
about reading Archon
think it
cards.
was 11.
We'll let Quick Draw clickety
Um,
clack for a couple seconds, and then he'll say 10.
it was 10. All right. Yeah. How's that tea?
Yeah, I'm all out. Good timing. Good pacing. All right. A lot of fun, folks. Well, then, without further ado, we'll hear a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor, or rather, this episode of Bother Beaker, was brought to you by Easy A, the premium tutoring service for aspiring Archons. Unleak the secrets, unlock the secrets, unleak. Don't leak them either. If they're leaking, unleak them. Unlock the secrets of the Crucible with expert guidance tailored to your unique strengths and weaknesses. Whether you're mastering complex strategies or refining your gameplay, Easy A provides personalized support to ensure your success. Achieve library access with ease and conquer your opponents with newfound confidence. Enroll in Easy A today and use promo code The Fawns at checkout for an extra 15% off your enrollment price. Easy A. There you go. Quick Draw, you think you could use a little help from the folks over at Easy A?
I a little unsure what EZA is selling still.
It's a tutoring service, like getting you an A in the class, but it's an AE, like the ligature. That's now a full letter, I guess.
And it is okay. All right. Now I get the Fonz reference. Now I get it now.
Yeah, I was trying to drag out
Yeah.
the A's. Yeah,
I got it at the end when you drug it out. I was like, okay, all right.
yeah, yeah. Well, now that we've fully explained, that's for the bottom of the Beaker After Dark segment. Stick around, folks, after the show. But folks, I should also let you know that Bottom of the Beaker is recorded live right here at twitch.tv/sloppylabwork 9:30 Eastern Time. You can find recordings of our past shows over at youtube.com. We are at Sloppy Labwork over there. And for the very best content, 34? No, 57 times distilled and scraped from the bottom of the beaker, you can search for that very phrase in your podcatcher of choice. And we'll be there, ready to bid with you. Thanks so much, Quick Draw, as always. Any word for the folks getting off at the final audio stop?
This has been a real pleasure. Thanks to the chat. Very good conversation. Thank you guys for contributing to that. Come back next week, everybody, to add more to that conversation. We love having people live with us. So thank you guys. And everyone listening out there, please stay sloppy.
Stay sloppy indeed. All right, very good. I'm going to cut the old Zencaster recording. Very good.
Did I hear bottom of the Beaker?
Bottom of the Beaker? You may have. It was a sloppy one. We're not going to fix that in post either.
You know what's funny is I had the pleasure of seeing Wait, Don't Tell Me in person live about a
Oh,
month
did you?
ago.
Nice.
It
At
was
the
a lot of
Chase
fun.
Bank Auditorium? No, that's in Chicago. You were
No, it's in
at
Chicago. This was in Pittsburgh, Heinz Hall in Pittsburgh.
Heinz Hall.
Um, but it was fascinating to watch, like behind the scenes how they do it, how they make it live.
Mm.
And the part that I thought was the most interesting was after the entire show ended.
Yeah.
They did their whole outro thing like that, and everyone applauded. And they said, "Okay, guys, the show's not over yet because what we're going to do now is we have our producers in the back, and they told us all the times that we messed up the audio, and they re-record it. And so they literally just like kind of the producers feed them through their headsets, like, okay, like say this line again for me, and they just
Ah,
say it again, and they re-record it, and they like use the magic of audio editing
wow.
to put it right over there, and you can't even tell when you're listening to the podcast or the show.
Nice. I wouldn't. I don't think I would have guessed that. There are some times where you'll get some weird continuity things for some shows, but I wouldn't have guessed it there. That's good.
They
So
do a really good job making it seamless.
kudos to them. Yeah, if we could pick two spirit casts from NPR, I would take. Wait, don't tell me. We have to do a quiz show
Oh,
episode at
that
some
would be
point.
fun.
That'd be a
That
lot
would
of
be
fun.
fun.
And then two, obviously, two Italian guys who just kind of snort into the microphone and sometimes say intelligent things, but they're very deep and super awesome. Is Car Talk, obviously. Spirit.
Oh, Car Talk. I
Yeah.
haven't listened to Car Talk in forever.
It's been a while, but
That's kind of what we are, though, isn't it?
flip and flop the Cardboard Brothers. I
Should
don't
we
know.
get callers? Should we get callers in the show? What do you think about that?
Take in callers. We could take in callers. That would be interesting. We could probably do it. Yeah.
I think we could find a way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, Ketzer. We should make a channel for that. I don't know if we have a great
Heck
channel for
yeah,
that.
that's a great idea. I will make one.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. We probably had very similar childhoods with respect to NPR. Listen, sitting in the back of cars where it's being played and being
Uh,
like, I really hope this is an NPR or a car talk NPR
Actually,
segment.
I didn't really listen to NPR as a kid.
Hmm.
My parents were not big on radio, and they kind of let me and my brothers choose whatever we wanted to listen to on the radio, which was, um, you know,
Wow.
yeah,
Blessed childhood, quick draw. A blessed childhood.
yeah, lots of alternative rock radio when I was a kid.
Nice. Yeah, I listened to a lot of car talk, a lot of NPR too, but a lot of car talk specifically. And I couldn't care less about car repair. I couldn't tell you the first thing about car maintenance,
It's
but
the best thing about that show is
I love listening to the show. So there you
it's
go.
such a good. Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I don't know anything about cars, and I don't actually care about that. Um, you guys have a good view of the cats in the background fighting right now.
Yeah, this is the holy moly. Oh, all right. I bid four chains on the one on the right.
This is bottom of the Beaker after dark. This is what it is.
Yeah. I don't know if we're gonna get taken off the air for animal cruelty or something. Quick draw. Jeez.
So you were bidding on the brown one?
I'm bidding on the one that I see on the right, which is closest to you.
Oh yeah, you're very bad at this bidding thing, just like in Keyforge.
They've got the high ground
The
right now.
the black cat's gonna win every time. There you go.
Oh, dang it. All
There you
right.
go. You lose again.
Lose again. All
Speaking
right.
of me losing, we gonna play a game of Keyforge?
I think there's only one thing that we could play.
I think. Well, we could play chess or something, but no one wants to see that.
We could play chess too. Uh,
No, we're gonna play.
yeah, quick try
That's
taken
that's a
down
good
for
one.
the Floof wrestling ring. Wrestling ring.
Oh man.
Oh, nice.
Um, there's actually a third cat sitting on my lap right now. She knows to stay out of it.
That's
Um,
the real winner. Yeah, adaptive chess. There is kind of adaptive chess out there. Armageddon chess is played as a final tiebreaker in premier level events. World championship level events, where you bid time on the clock for
hmm,
which color to play, and the trick is that you bid to play the black pieces, so which is traditionally a worst starting position to be going second, but the player with the white pieces has to win. So if the game ends in a draw, the person with the black pieces wins. So you're bidding for that. Um, yeah, or yeah, bid for pawns. People will play with advantages of material, but the
hmm.
like Armageddon
That's what I was.
format is actually played.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going. Actually, was bidding for material, not for time.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Um, well, we're gonna play an adaptive best of one. I have to assume,
I would assume so too.
and
Uh,
I think I might be playing Dark Tidings.
do I want? I've been playing one deck all Kagi season. I don't know. I could play
Yeah,
that one. I don't know if that would be
I am
bad
not
form.
playing the one that I played all season. I'm gonna play a different one.
All
One
right.
that I just want to play. I'm gonna break my first rule of familiarity. I'm gonna play a deck that I've only played twice, but it's fun, so I'm gonna play it again.
Okay. Maybe I will go to the old adaptive tag and pick out something here. You know a lot of these already. I could do a DT just for fun. I could do the Guardian. The Guardian that encourages entry would be really fun too.
Hmm. Don't think I know that one.
Don't know that one at all. No, I'm gonna play the general. This maybe if I do make it to the top cut, I may switch up anyway. So this would be a nice swan song
Hmm.
for the deck.
You're just saying that so people don't know what to expect.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, I'm making a beginner game with the password sloppy.
So for anyone that was really invested in the Flume Fraslin, they're still going, and they're at the point now where the winning Flume, the black one, is now licking and grooming the losing one, just as a sign of dominance.
Wow. So uh, the dominant one is doing the grooming?
Yes.
Interesting. Interesting. Hmm.
What is the password here? What did you do?
Is it not sloppy? I could have fat fingered it.
Yeah, I think you fat fingered that one.
Well, I think you're messing up, but I'm gonna make a new game anyway, so there's no way to tell.
I can never prove it now.
Nope. All right. Password sloppy, and it is adaptive best of one. Sloopy. Ooh. People seeing all of the decks that I'm testing flashed up at the top of the list. Spoilers there. All right, quick draw. What are you playing? You're
All right,
playing.
I have Igor Abel,
Ooh.
Maître de Dankat, a French
Oh,
deck.
is this the Honors Kesis Data Forge? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, this is an adaptive candidate for me. It's been a lot of fun in the two games that I've played. Got a lot of cool stuff, um, a lot of decision making in it. In that it has some targeted archives, it has some house cheating, um, like with a Val and two togethers, a phase shift. So some good stuff going on here.
Very cool. Colored dot system. I'm missing something. Also, British spelling of colored. Oh, very fancy. Hmm. Is that a Hans Niemann? Oh, is that a Hans Niemann reference? No, those are beads, not dots. Oh, double. Oh yeah, double yellow. That could be for maybe a rush grind scale or a spicy peppers. Yeah.
So one thing that I did not mention during the show that I think is something that as I'm looking at the decks now is a factor for me as well is looking for key cheats. I should add that
Ah,
to the note. I think it's very important to look for key cheats as just kind of a way to see like, okay, like what other outs does this deck have? Um, but I think I have made my choice.
reading. Trying to go through all the different things that we talked about. Be a good doobie here. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. This is a cool deck. Quick draw.
Yeah, I do enjoy it quite a bit.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Well, I think I know what I want to play too.
Okay, well, we've been on the same deck this time. That's good.
Cool.
And last time you and I played an adaptive best of one was less than a week ago, and we both ended up choosing opposite decks.
I
Just
remember
played a
that.
game of reversal.
I remember that, and that was a. You know how people talk about sometimes adaptive leads to these high variance games where the lesser player just walks away with a win just because chance. One of those.
Is that what you're thinking happened there?
Because there were so many chains. All right, two, an easy pass for you at two. Quick draw.
Hmm.
Four, the jump scare. All right, the mind games at work. I like it.
Yes.
Well, jump scare right back to you.
Mm-hmm. Now we don't know who's going first either, so now we're at the turn, and this is when I start to look at the efficiency of the general and what it has going for it. So it's got like the junk restoration. Um, Came back wrong, couple regrowths. It's going to be a little bit harder to get haunted, I think, the more chains that it gets. And so actually one of the things I was kind of hoping when I bid 4 was that you would jump to 6. And I will be fully transparent. I did not have a number in mind before we started this bidding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you?
I do. I did and do. I did and do.
You did? Okay. I was going to ask, do you still have that number? Um, it's a bit scary. I think we're close to the point, but I'm gonna pass here.
Okay.
So what was your number?
My number was 8. My number was
Okay.
8. But I mean, again, you're in the like, what's the two chains difference make?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was 8.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, cool. I have some things here. Hmm.
Hmm.
Let's throw that
I
one
won.
back.
I won the toss, so that's good.
You did. You did.
I don't know if I like this. This I like. Yeah. Now we're in business.
All right, let's see the Val.
There
Nice.
she is.
Nice. Seems good. Seems good. Quick Draw played a Star Alliance and Logos creature. Don't have a ton of duders in there.
So you did mulligan.
I did. I mulliganed. I'm gonna scoop up the Val,
Yep. That's what I was afraid of.
uh, and I'll actually. I think we're gonna hit the rest of those Logos cards, creatures in your hand.
Okay.
So we got Eddie. There's a
Got
Force
Eddie.
Field, Ambervac, Colonist Chapman, Phase Shift, and Francis. Okay, cool. Cool, cool.
Yeah. The scoop up was not what I was hoping for here.
Yeah, it was nice to see. It was nice to see. Oh, cool. So Force Field came down, as did Ambervac. Force Field's very nice on a neighbor of Colonist Chapman that's off house. Very nice. We're going to go into Geistoid. We are not taking our archives. Gonna play a Sloppy Boo and discard that Cauldron. That's a liability
Hmm. It's a
anyway.
pretty good draw you got there. Pretty good draw.
Yeah. Give
So
you
the factor
aggressive
of.
hatefulness.
Hmm. And how do you? Okay, so I am going to be purging top card, which
Yep.
in this case is Eddie. All right. I think we'll go Logos here. Gonna reap to start.
Hmm.
Phase shift. Let's archive 2.
Nice. Very nice.
And
Hmm.
let's steal 2. Oh, steal 1? Yeah, it's not evil. Dang. Wish the thing were evil.
Cool. Cool. Hmm. Okay. Interesting. I've whittled myself down to a funky slice of deck. But okay. So we purged through your conjecture. Nice. Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Quick draw. Very interesting. I am probably going to go. I feel great about my options here. Tempted to do that, but I'm going to go untamed. No, in the archives, we're going to regrow. Let's actually regrow this Haunting Witch. Be a little
Mm-hmm.
greedy. It's going to come down, capture onto itself. Play this Hydra. And that's it.
Okay, so can and should I handle any of these? Yeah, I think I will. I think I will. I think we'll go shadows here. Not take the archive. Um, gonna fight off the Haunting Witch.
Ooh, great question. Mm-hmm. And Jackie Tar, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
somewhat, I guess. Oof, Hobnobber, nice. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think I gotta get rid of that Hobnobber too, unfortunately.
Yeah, I tried to spread out my witches. Normally you want to put your witches behind the taunt, but I wanted to spread them out in case you can get some splash attack going there.
You know, I don't. Question from the questions from the chat on like mind games for bidding. Uh, it's very different, I guess, bidding like face to face and when banter is allowed, than when uh, it's not. I guess. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if I'd say there tends to be that much in the way of mind games for it. Um, I think. All right, we'll make some more of this stuff, and I think we
Mm-hmm.
gotta deal with that Hobnobber for now. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. Certainly with quick draw, there's a very, very specific persona
What's my persona?
that I have to adopt in our chain bidding.
I don't follow.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Do I want to give you Amber with a fight?
Sounds delicious. What's the
One,
worst that could
two,
happen?
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You've only got one untamed left. So I'm going to let your Hydra live. We'll go shadows here.
Cool, cool.
Let's um, scoop the Haunting Witch. I'm going to reap for an extra one. And then we're going to reap and take care of the Haunting Witch.
Nice. Oh, very nice. All right. Still no on this archives. Val hanging out back there. Ooh.
I would like the Val back someday.
Someday. It's coming. All right. Let's take this one out now. The Hydra can go. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Catching up on the chat here. Sorry, folks. Ooh. Yeah, I could see the mind games being a thing in and there being like an element of gamesmanship that folks bring. I don't know. Uh, yes, you know, wrestling over there. The intensity intensifies, as it were.
Yeah, you're out of chains now, and I am feeling behind the eight ball.
I very much enjoy those mind games and gamesmanships in a casual setting amongst friends. I don't know. I feel like it's the sort of thing that could turn uncomfortable very quickly uh, in an OP event sort of scenario. But I don't know. With quick draw, I just layer it on as thick as I can and get him out of his comfort zone. Get him thinking that I'd actually go to 8 when I was really thinking it was 4, but I'm just going to keep hitting the next button.
I don't like this draw.
This is all a setup for folks who are watching at home. Overestimate the general. Mm.
I don't love it. I am gonna techno babble that guy.
uh,
Officer's Blaster,
mm-hmm.
and then we're gonna together here.
You got me. You got me. They are nice countertops, though. You know, nicer than they were. Okay, I got a key. If I was truly distracted, I would pick the wrong color there. But there we have it. And a little bit like the Drunken Master too. You know, a little bit better, slightly better when a little distracted. Still no on the archives. Still no. All right, we're gonna
You sure?
brain dart that Jackie Tar. Yeah. I'm gonna shock collar. I'm gonna just keep stacking the upgrades there. I'm gonna be really sad though when you flip your deck. Do you have another Ambervac? That would be terrible. Oh, I did get distracted. Oh no. You don't have another Ambervac, but I'll be real sad when you flip your deck. Okay. And we're gonna put this on the Reaper. Yes. Okay. Cool. Easy clap. I know. You know, salt. You're triggering me in all the best ways, Cloggin. I've wallpapered now as of a weekend or two ago 2 walls in my life, and I'd be okay without doing a third. Yeah. Team Quincy for the win. Holy moly, chat's ganging up on me.
Oh, good. Finally.
You know, can't catch a break.
All right, we're gonna play some artifacts. Um,
Very nice. Very nice.
I think I'm just gonna burn the borrow.
Yeah, legit.
Um, hmm.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna put.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I'm just gonna put the ransom on. Probably you haven't played a ton of Mars yet, so let's put it back on the Mars. Um, I don't like your Grim Reaper, so I'm gonna make sure he's purged,
Yeah, it's legit.
and then I can get the check here, which I will take.
done, but we'll take the blue key. Nice. Hmm. Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. Still haven't seen. Still haven't seen that BDQ. You've got no archives currently. But haven't played Honors Kesis either. No Archon's callbacks there. Just kind of seeing what our potential is for jumping up into Data Forge range. Neither Eddie yet as well. You have some healthy logos approaching. Hmm. Healthy logos approaching. Force field, blaster, big duder. Yeah. Don't love that either.
I think you're in a better situation than you're leading on.
Definitely. No, I'm going to take a reasonably quiet turn. I'm just trying to figure out I'm hoping the next few turns are going to play out with you unloading a decent amount of logos and making my third key kind of annoying to lock in. Hmm. Okay. We'll go Mars here. No, still on the archives. Capture onto this duder. Play Xylo. I'm always mixing up. I'm always mixing up Mole and Ransom. It was like double
Hmm.
checking and make sure I'm not capturing
Ah,
very
yes.
sillily. Yes. Oh, Night Ketzer, thanks for hanging out.
See you, Katzer.
And B-Hawk has entered the chat. Yo, B-Hawk, welcome, bud.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. The,
All right,
fi-
let's see here.
the fighting felines are respectfully fancied, as it were. Mm-hmm. Very cool. What is purged? Scoop? Yeah, yeah. Oh, funny. Borrow in Cauldron is kind of funny, especially if it gets borrowed while there are some things under it. Unlike the Geistoid one that destroys it and then replays it, right? You're gonna take
Yeah,
it with the stuff still
yeah,
under it.
that's
Yeah.
true. That is a funny interaction. You're right.
Hmm.
All right. I think
I'm gonna see all that logos.
I think I'm gonna try to do some logos.
Nice.
I think. I've a lot of decisions here. This is like the house cheating, like I was talking about earlier, really comes into play here, and knowing the right things to do as far as the house cheating is interesting.
You played the phase shift. Okay, cool.
Yeah, day shift I believe is purged. No, it's not purged.
I'm purged. Oh, so you said do some logos things, but you didn't say call logos. So maybe we'll see the logos come together.
I haven't called it yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm leaning. Yeah, I think I want to. think I want to get some uses, get some efficiency going. Um, Play that one.
Seaborg, nice.
Um, think I think I'm enjoying that ward. So I think I'm gonna just fight to steal against the elusive,
Makes sense.
and then Eddie's gonna archive one and fight or to reap. I think I'm gonna reap, and then I think I'm gonna play the Death Quark here.
Nice.
We'll get the Doctor, and we will get Francis. And I think I'm going to repeat it. And let's get that. Let's get the Ghost Tree. And I think the Seaborg is correct here. And then I'll let you go from there.
Very cool. Hmm. Hmm. It's the right time to play Persephone, right? It's a good question. It's a good question. I'll have to figure out when I play IRL. Yeah. I think I still discard this cauldron, get haunted more quickly. Do I care?
Very hard to get haunted against the Curse of Forgetfulness.
In zero recaps, we have heard on. I'm going to bring back the Subductomatic for some sloppy efficiency. Pop a ward. And end the turn there.
All right. Well, I got a key.
Got a key.
Let's see here.
How XYZ player next? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. TCO definitely. I don't know. Changed how some things interact. Um, Honestly, I think it. There was one Vault Tour, the first Vault Tour that we went to under GG era, the Philadelphia one, Quick Draw. I played T. Zager, the Lighthouse Dock, and up until that point, I had really only played it in like competitive setting online, and it was a very,
Yeah.
very different experience.
Right.
Very different experience. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that looks good. I will not take the archive. I see you very generously decided not to make Amber.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice of you. I'm going to make the Armadrone Star Alliance anyway.
Yeah, legit.
Going to make Captain Corsage Star Alliance as well.
Nice.
I
Nice,
will
nice.
fight and take that back. I will reap. I will technobabble on the witch. I will together to play a data forge for nothing and an honors Kesis to say goodnight. Perfect
Ooh.
math. DT best set.
Nice.
That's the key cheats in game like one game. That's like a huge difference right there.
Yeah.
Like I think you probably had a little bit of amber control, especially with like the Adeptomatic. Could have taken me off check and kind of like anything goes from there. Um, I think it's really, really important to sneak a key in Adaptive Best of One.
Yeah, I think at this point, I could take you off once. I'd have to take you off once and then threaten. In Untamed, I have a couple capture pips scattered. A capture pip. Um, Mars and Geistoid are really where I would need to do the amber control. Um, and I'd have a tougher time bursting there. Yeah, but I don't disagree with you. I think in this one, you were probably winning from here either way. Um, but it was more dramatic, and I appreciate
It
that.
felt it felt very behind. I felt very behind.
I think it felt very close right around when the deck flipped, when my deck flipped, and post that. Not that that was terribly significant. I had most of the stuff that cared about hauntedness already in the bin, and haven't drawn in anything that cared a ton about whether or not I was haunted. I did happen to mill an awful lot of uh, good stuff. Um,
Yeah, I think the Mars, right? There was a lot of Mars you milled.
I milled a lot of Mars, and I milled. It's not there. Yeah, a decent amount of the. So I milled like the mass abduction. The scoop up got Val early on,
That was
um,
big.
but some of the recursion to set up like big haunting witch plays got nerfed there. And I remember
Hmm.
looking at the deck, much to the chat's disappointment, and seeing an even split of not very impressive cards remaining.
I had the same exact feeling. I had the same situation where I was 555 left in deck,
Hmm.
and I hadn't really drawn super well before that. So like, man, it's tough because I think maybe that's why like 2/2/2s seem like they never end because you have an even chance of like drawing anything when you're stuck in those 2/2/2s.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, if you get a flood of one house early on, you're likely to get floods of other houses later, or at least a little
Yeah,
bit more.
yeah. I
So
kept
it's
redrawing
fair.
shadows, like one shadows, like each time, even if I called shadows and played two shadows, I draw one more shadows the next time, which is like really it slowed me down quite a bit. But I had a lot of value at the bottom of the deck, which is like both of the diplomats, both of the key cheats. I had one of the togethers near the end, which obviously was clutch. And so like from about two turns before, like the turn that I deliberated the logos, I was leaning into the honors Kesis on a Star Alliance turn from there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I ultimately went with logos, just to kind of like unload the logos while I could, um, and then get the shadows card out of my hand since I was pretty sure I was not going back into shadows. Archive that, um, and it worked out perfectly. Even though I had the final analysis on bottom still in my deck, but didn't end up needing it.
So let's see. So why the fights because
The fight because the brash grabber had two amber on it.
Brash Grabber had two member, right? Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay. You got no
so it
steal,
gave me
but you got the
gave me just
Boomerang
enough.
back.
Yeah, didn't get the steal.
Gotcha. Cool. Nice. So, how did you feel about the bid and the deck selection after having played a game?
Um, I think we were right to bid on the general. I felt good about the bid until you said you were going to go to eight. Then I was like, oh, maybe I should have. Maybe I underestimated it. I felt behind from like the first three turns, especially after the scoop up.
Hmm.
Um, I felt like I had undersold the general, but
Hmm.
neither deck has a ton of C, which is interesting. I actually I do like that. That's my style. I wouldn't consider that like a good adaptive choice is to bring low C, but I it's my style and adaptive to bring low C. Um, and just like recognizing what kind of C they have available and playing around that, I think is pretty important. Like I kept my word on that Armadrone, or was it Armadrone? Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yeah, I kept the word on that, knowing that like I want this thing to stick around, and I think it will. So um, that turned out to be pretty important there to get that fight.
Yeah, the fight was good. I don't mind the low C in here. It does feel it's low, but it's workable, and I think that kind of it's right in the sweet spot of able to punch up or down. If you can work with it, there are tools there, and it,
Hmm.
to manage with. But managed not well or with a stumble on some of the mills, it can be a liability. Um,
Hmm.
so don't.
How,
D-
so
yeah, yeah.
how did you feel about the bid then?
Uh, I I still feel okay about it. Yeah, I still feel okay about it. Eight may have been high. Eight may have been high, but I think there's still going to be games where we go to eight and the general wins the matchup.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit uh, past ideal, but I don't know if I'd say after one game there that uh, I don't think it's in a reasonable range for like preference and familiarity. You know?
Hmm. Yeah, you had the misfortune of going second as well, and you mulliganed. So I
Yeah,
don't know if that slowed you down a lot. I mean,
a little bit.
eh,
I think I definitely milled poorly, and that happens, and that's like part of the like risk or trade off uh, that you buy into when you take a deck that's going to do some milling or some tokenizing. Uh, and I actually have a decent amount of recursion. And I had a moment in the game where I could have used regrowth to get back the target, and then find my way back to mass abductions and those sorts of things. Um, and went a different route. And I don't know if that was the right call, but I still had kind of a pathway back to some of the board control, um, and kind of thought that I was better off not going with it. But that may have been a mistake. Maybe
but
a
those are the
mistake.
kind of decisions that are great for adaptive because
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you have this ability to like archive anything from your discard pile. Like those options are almost not endless. Obviously, you have like 30 options at most, but
There are a
it's
lot of different pathways that I could have gone,
yeah.
and there wasn't one that's like, oh, this is obviously the right one. Overwhelmingly clear that this is the right one. At least to me, I felt like I was legitimately struggling with which is should be the right way to go. And it's not so much archiving or recursion that it was, play three in here somewheres and grab six cards. It's you get to choose one, and it's got to be the right one, sort of thing. And maybe I chose the wrong one, and there you go. But I think it's like just kind of in that sweet spot of you have enough flexibility and recursion to have a through line, but not so much that it's just like broadband, you know? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. But
So
that was fun.
it was a good one. It's always fun to play DT, and the general is a good one. The general is pretty cool. There's I don't think I've played with the general yet. I've seen it. I've seen you play a number of games, and I've seen the haunting witches go crazy. Um, so I was definitely going out of my way to make sure that I got rid of them as soon as they came down.
They can for sure. If you give it time to set up, they can be super bursty. Uh, and the chat, I'm not sure if they're poking at me or truly commending, but not telling on Val. I legitimately did think about giving you back the Val on a number of occasions, um, more to clog up your hand when I
Hmm.
didn't expect you to go back to Starlines, and being far
Yeah.
enough along in the game where I thought it was unlikely you'd recenter. I even here I was reluctant at the end. I mean, obviously I didn't do it, but may have been right to stick it back in your hand at some point. Um,
Hmm.
I
There
don't
were
know.
a few turns that I had like the turn I went logos eventually. I did have two star lines in hand that I thought like I have a pretty good argument for going star lines here anyway. And if you had given me Val, I think that would have tipped the scales. And maybe
Mm.
that would have hurt me. Maybe that would have made me make the wrong decision.
It was tough, especially with a together looming, along with bouncing Death Quark. You could probably recenter her in a pinch if you really needed to.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
but the key cheats, I thought the Data Forge was unlikely to hit, and you lined up the Honor Skeesis really well. So kudos there. Um, yeah, I was feeling better. I was feeling better about the Honor Skeesis when you pulled your archives. You had at one point an archive of at least two or three. Um,
I had two in there. It was maybe it was three. I had a borrow and I had a I think it was together. And I really like almost pulled it for the together earlier.
yeah,
Ended up waiting. But the turn I pulled it is when I played it together to play the Archon's callback to build up a big hand, and
Yeah.
I luckily drew into a pretty sizable Shadows hand at that point.
No. Nice. Nice. Yeah, and the amber totals kind of worked out where it didn't seem like it made sense to just grab the tide. Uh, it hurts to take the tide just to prevent a steal with a flying specter. Um,
I
but
never even called Shadows after that.
no, it never came up to it. And even there were a couple cases where, or times when maybe you could have, but I was at 0 amber. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I think if you would have raised the tide for either Ambervac or Flying Spectre, it would have been a win for me.
yeah, I was pretty happy to let the amber gather on flying specter. I may have been a little overeager to take the hobnobber out. Um, no, I'm not sure on that either. Too still
Hmm.
with the diplomats uh, looming. Uh, yeah, and that shadows board, it was tough. It was tough. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
more witches here than I thought.
Hmm. Yeah, I could see that. The
Chat,
Armadrone.
chat asking, yeah, who fought more and who won? Well, do
I
you
think I fought more.
are you asking in absolute terms or relative to number of creatures on board over the course of the game? You may have fought more in absolute terms, but I think I have a decent claim to highest percentage of fights given chances to reap or fight.
Um, did you ever fight?
Yeah, I fought a couple times, at least.
What did you fight with?
Blurnian Hydra fought off Hobnobber, and
Pretty sure that's it.
could be it. Could be
Yeah,
it.
you reaped with the Grim Reaper to remove something else.
Yep. Yep. Did I get
Yep.
other reaps?
Cloggin confirms one fight.
One fight. All right, maybe. But how many reaps though? Let's see.
No, assault damage did not kill the Hobnobber. It was a straight fight. It was a fair fight.
Oh man.
I don't know, man. I feel like you're really grasping at straws for the Cloggin's affection right now, and I
No,
don't
I'm
think it's
like
gonna work for you.
I had one reap. I had one reap that game. One reap that game. That was my only reap with the Grim Reaper. Wow. Wow. One reap, really? I'm just surprised. One
I
reap,
did
one
try to keep your
fight.
board in check. I don't have
You
a ton
did.
of creature removal, but there's two Technobabbles that do work. The ransom was pretty good actually. The ransom was kind of nice, especially on a creature with Omni.
Quick draw, look at this. Reaping with an armor drone that's warded. Come on, man. Reaping with Francis? Reaping with Francis?
Yeah,
Shameful. Shameful.
yeah. Well, maybe if you made some amber, I would have fought with that Armadrone.
Well, there you go. The true aficionado of the fights even when there is no payoff on the fight effect. Yeah. Well, all I'm hearing is excuses. But anyway, it's getting late.
Listen, JT. I win like once every 6 months. All right.
You know what? You are earning your adaptive stars, as it were. You may have not have a great record overall on our streamed games post recording, but you have a pretty darn good record on our streamed adaptive short games.
I'd have to go back to the record books, but I hope you're right because I'm very proud of that.
Mm-hmm. There you go. If we play a
It was
top
a good
cut
game.
Kagi game,
Good game.
we'll stream it too.
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure that you stream it so you're distracted.
All
Yeah.
right, deal, deal.
All right. Excellent.
All right, folks. Thanks for hanging out. We're gonna sign off there. It's been a good
Yeah.
time as always, and we'll see you
Thanks,
on the lab.
guys. See you soon.